Hello, y'all. Welcome back to Baylin's Book Club. Just a disclaimer, if you hear that like in the background, someone else does live here. Yes, and they are in the shower right now. Other people do exist. Oh, let me put that down. But I figured this would be a perfect time to film. No one can hear me. I can't be embarrassed, so we'll just have to deal. Okay. What are your drinks? What are your drinks? I need to know. First of all, do we? Let me just my fucking knuckles making them crooked. Do we notice anything? Do we notice? Anyways, what are we drinking, guys? I have found my new obsession, and it's clearly Canadian sparkling water. Like, oh my gosh, I'm such a sparkling water girly. I have to admit though, much better in the glass, much better in the glass. Why are they like pranking me? Okay, I got this online with my groceries, and like when they show the six pack, I literally thought it was like six glasses. They're cans. Like it's not bad, but the glass is like 1,000% better. I mean, obviously, that's why it's $2.50 fucking dollars a glass. But oh my gosh, guys, I feel like I'm in a commercial. That's what I'm drinking. So we left off on a very tense note with Bud basically pointing out his father, who he believes to be his father, Herman E. Calloway, and saying, "It's you. I know it's you." So yes, I know that was just a terrible place to leave you guys, but now we are going to really get into it. Okay. So let's see how that unfolds. First, though, I do need to just introduce a couple more characters. So obviously we have Herman E. Calloway. I'm going to either be calling him Mr. Calloway, Calloway, HEC. I'm not saying all that. He's actually really mean. You're gonna hate him quite literally until the very, very last page of the book. He has his reasons, but let's be so for real, like you're dealing with a child. I actually don't remember him being so dislikable. And then we have Jimmy. I think in my last video, I called him the drummer. Jimmy is the one that everyone was looking at and being like, oh, is this your kid? Because you're a whore. He's actually the old horn guy, as Bud calls him. So he plays the horn. He's old. His name is Jimmy. We love Jimmy. He obviously probably has a couple children because he very well knows how to talk to Bud, communicate with him, and just kind of deal with him better than most other people in the band do. And then we have Steady Eddie. He's the saxophone player. He's good natured. He takes a liking to Bud and how he thinks. And yeah, he's just really chill. I like Steady Eddie. His name fits him. And then we have Miss Thomas. Oh my God. Miss Thomas, I know I keep saying there are like so many memorable parts of this book. Miss Thomas and just the way she operates, and especially the way that Bud describes her, is one of the most memorable characters in a book I have ever come across. And that might just simply be because of my own bias, because I love this book and I love Miss Thomas and I love Bud and I love how he describes Miss Thomas. But at the end of the day, like you'll understand. Okay, I'm gonna point out the specific like paragraph I'm talking about. I quite literally have like a paragraph of this book like memorized. And I just kind of keep it like tucked away in my brain with me at all times. Like I'm being so for real. So we love Miss Thomas. Those are the three people. I'm tumbling over my words. Those are the three people that I'm going to introduce. There's obviously more people in the band, but I can't lie, they don't really matter. So those are the ones that matter, and let's get into it. So after Bud pulls his stunt and he's basically pointing at this guy, calling him out, HEC is really not having it. He calls him a scamp and he's saying like, yo, your mom's probably a whore or something, that thinks, she don't know who her daddy is, who your daddy is. So she just made up some lie about a famous musician. It's not me. It's not me, baby. He's really just like kind of over it. But everyone else in the band is realizing, hey, even if we don't fully believe this kid, because at this point, no one believes Bud. It's not just Hermione Calloway. No one believes him. They kind of just think he's a dumb kid, which is very unfortunate because Bud is not dumb. Nothing out of his mouth is stupid, but they are assuming, oh, he's just some stupid kid. His mom led him the wrong way and now he's here. Like, dumb kids don't get in front of Hermione Calloway. You know what I mean? But even though they are all under the impression that this kid is kind of delusional and so is his mom, the rest of the band is like, okay, Mr. Calloway, we might not believe him, but he's obviously like in a crisis and he's still a child and we need to help him. And Herman is having none of that. Jimmy kind of pulls Bud aside and is like, hey, the band is going out to eat. I'm going to take you along with us, but you have to tell me more information to get this food. Like, we need to know who you are and what's going on. And so Bud agrees. So Jimmy and Bud start talking, and Jimmy asks him about his mom. And Bud is like, yeah, she died. And Jimmy's like, okay, well, did she die of like old age? Like, what's going on here? And Bud is like, yeah, she was old when she died. She was old. Now keep in mind, okay, Bud is 10. His mom was 26 when she died. She was not old. But as a child, I mean, I remember as a kid, my mom, one time she asked me, she was like, when do you think I was born? Which, as a mother, why would you ask a child that? You know I'm about to say some fuck shit. I don't know how numbers work. I think I said like 11T73. So, yes, he probably thought his mom was hella old. And upon hearing that, you have to imagine, being on Jimmy's end of it. There's this orphan kid that just showed up in front of your band saying that your bassist, the creator of the band, is his father. You're asking him, yo, when did your mom die? He says, oh yeah, she was really old. She was 26, which means that his education probably isn't the best as well, since he doesn't know how numbers work. Imagine all of the things hitting Jimmy at once here. No wonder he didn't really let Bud go just because HEC don't want to fuck with him. Jimmy and a few other bandmates are around Bud at this point, and they're not completely poking fun at him, but they're just trying to lighten the mood basically because he's trauma dumping and he doesn't really understand that that's what he's doing. And so they're like, damn kid, like you must cry a lot. Like, that's really sad. Like, And then Bud is like, oh no, it's fine, bro. My eyes don't cry no more. I'm chilling. And I feel like you really feel the tone change, and everyone just gets extremely concerned, as they should be. But then Jimmy kind of breaks the silence and he's like, I like that. My eyes don't cry no more. I might use that for a song, but I am concerned. They end up getting to the restaurant, and this is another first that we get to see with Bud because he's never been to a restaurant before. But I think it's also pretty funny because the way he's describing the restaurant, you can tell that it's just some person's house and they are hosting people and they are serving them food, but I wouldn't call it a restaurant. But Bud is very, enamored with the amount of food, the fact that everyone can get different food, the fact that it's all good, it's all hot, there's multiple courses. Like, quite literally, this man has never been to a restaurant before. Like, the way that he was describing, like, well, he got something different and he got something different and I got something different. How does all of this food exist? Well, you have to realize that in the Depression in Flint, Michigan, in very poor areas, they're probably eating like the same 3 or 4 foods, same handful of foods for every meal, every day. Even on special occasions, they're just making those foods more zhuzhy, but it's not like there's a different food. I mean, we saw the fuck shit that they were putting in the soup in that Hooverville. Basically, excuse me, deer ankles and roadkill is like a delicacy. So you have to remember Bud probably hasn't even seen half this shit before. So I just think it's really fun coming with him into the restaurant and seeing him finally be enamored with something in a good way. And it's bringing him happiness and it's bringing him joy, and he's in a good environment for now. So as the band is sitting down to eat, Bud meets another member of the band, Miss Thomas. She is the vocal stylist. She is not the singer. Vocal stylist, baby, vocal stylist. Okay, and we find out why those specific words are used instead of singer a little bit later. But Miss Thomas comes over to Bud and she's basically like, well, what happened? You're covered in cuts, scrapes. It looks like your eye is infected. How did none of these men put some fucking what is it called? What is that called? It starts with a P. Peroxide. There we go. Peroxide on any of your cuts. What is happening, baby? And in this moment, we see that Bud knows how to choose the women that he talks to. Okay, and we saw it with Miss Hill at the library, kind of taking a motherly role onto him, and now we see that with Miss Thomas. Okay, he trauma dumps on this lady. He tells her, well, ma'am, those are hornet stings. I was locked in a shed. Todd Amos beat me up. I was in a sundown town on the side of the road. All of this stuff happened to me, and now I look like this. And I feel like at this point, Bud cannot stop his mouth. Bud cannot stop his mouth. He feels so safe with this lady that it's all just kind of coming out. Like, any question she asks him, he's on it with the truth and the right answer. And he's just like, yeah, this is what happened. And then Herman E. Calloway butts in, and let me find the exact quote. Chill. Let me hold on. Yes, Herman E. Calloway decides that he's going to say something, and he says it sounds like Bud has a case of diarrhea of the mouth and constipation of the brain. He says this out loud to this child in front of these other adults who are hearing him tromping up about his terrible, terrible life. And he's like, yeah, you got diarrhea of the mouth and you're fucking stupid. Obviously, Miss Thomas shoots HEC a dirty look, basically telling him to shut the fuck up, as she should. But then she gets more on Bud's level, and she does break the news to him. She's like, Bud, I'm pretty sure there is absolutely no way that Mr. Calloway can be your father. And I feel like the rest of the band knows that this man ain't got no play in a while, okay? Because bandmates, when you get in spaces like that, they be talking about their conquests like it's nothing. These people would know if Herman E. Calloway had a little mistress on the side, had a little kid on the side. They all know he ain't had any in years. So they're really trying to figure out, Bud, who are you? Bud says, well, my mom gave me the idea that he was my father because Miss Thomas does ask him, okay, did your mom tell you that he was your father? Or like what? And Bud was like, oh, well, she didn't like use those words. And she's like, well, Bud, do you know that Hermione Calloway is a very famous musician and people all over the state know him? Basically insinuating like, your mom could have made this up because she don't know your dad. And unfortunately, Buzz says, oh, yeah, I didn't know he was famous, which makes him all the less credible to these people because it makes it more likely that his mom would just say, oh, it's just this random nigga. That's where he's at right now. Everyone is kind of looking at him with like pity, and you can hear it in their voice, not in their voice, in the words that they're saying, but I don't think Bud is catching on to that. Thankfully, though, he doesn't have to answer any more questions because the food comes out and he is having the time of his life eating this delicious meal. And he's looking around and he's seeing that actually everyone is having a great time. Everyone is being a great character except for the people in and around Herman E. Calloway's specific table. They're having like a terrible time and they look like they want to die. And Bud is just kind of realizing what kind of people he wants to surround himself with, and he's realizing that he can choose, finally, which table he sits at. He doesn't have to sit with Herman E. Calloway. And I feel like in this moment, we're kind of seeing Bud grow up in a way because he's unfortunately realizing, he's under the impression that this guy's his family. And as he is realizing that, he's also realizing that family isn't everything, and he doesn't even want to sit next to that guy because his vibes are so bad, even though he quite literally came all the way over here from Flint, Michigan to see him. So they're all telling stories about, the band and, their conquests, but Bud doesn't really understand that part. He just sees them as funny stories. He ends up laughing so hard that he starts crying. And the crying just turns into regular crying, not like laugh crying, and then he can't stop crying. And he immediately begins to feel embarrassed. And here we see that Bud really has no emotional control, and that's not a dig on him, but it's simply that his happiness has nowhere to go because he probably hasn't experienced this much happiness in his life like ever. Right? So he starts crying. He tries to cover his head with a napkin. He doesn't want anyone to look at him. He puts his head down, but it just keeps coming out, keeps coming out, keeps coming out. Miss Thomas comes over to him, puts his head against her chest, and is like, it's okay, bud. You're home. The band ends up taking Bud to where they all sleep. It's called Grand Calloway Station. I'm guessing it's just like a really big house, but Hermione Calloway, he seems to have a flair for the dramatic, so it's called Calloway Station. And they put him up in this room that's obviously this little girl's room, right? And he asks Miss Thomas once he's placed in this room, hey, the little girl that very obviously lives here, is she gonna be mad when she comes into her room and sees that I am here? And Miss Thomas pauses for a minute and she says, well, it's okay, Bud. She's gone. And then we cut and we see Bud is reminded of his rules and things number 28, which is very simple. It's just that gone equals dead. And this is probably one of his most accurate rules and things to date because he was right. The little girl is dead. That's why she's not going to have a problem with it. But it's also quite sad because you have to realize that he probably realized that gone means dead, passed away means dead, not here, not coming back means dead because of the way that people were talking about his mom. You don't want to tell a 6 year old, yeah, your mom is dead. You tell a 6 year old, oh, she's gone, sweetie. Oh, she's passed. Oh, she's not going to be coming back. That's probably where he started to understand those euphemisms. Well, Herman E. Calloway gets out from his car and he's also in Grand Calloway Station, unfortunately. Hi, Hare. Good morning. Um, he sees that Bud is posted up in this little girl's room and he just has an absolute fit. He comes barreling through the door, yelling at Bud, saying, don't touch any of my shit. There's bells everywhere. I know you're gonna touch some shit. Like, your stinky, nasty, scampy little ass better stay in that fucking bed. Fuck you. He lowers his voice down to this child, by the way, and he says, you've got the rest of them fooled, but not me. There's something about you that I don't like. I'm gonna find out what your game is, and believe you me, scamp, you're going back where you belong. What is it with black men and treating Bud so disgustingly awful? The last black man at the Amos. Okay, I guess I can't say black men because, like, obviously we have Lefty and we have all these other people. But I'm just saying, like, these fatherly figure black men. Why do they hate Bud so much? I'm just really not realizing. Like, even if you don't fully think this kid is in his right mind, he's still a child, and you're talking to him like that. Like, do you want to get beat up? Bud wakes up the next morning, once again realizing that he was so tired that someone came in and changed his clothes and tucked him in while he was asleep. And he actually sees, an extra, well, not an extra, his clothes folded up in the chair across from him. And this is a really sad moment. We can see that Bud is always thinking about his mom. I mean, obviously, he's 10 years old and his mom is dead, but we can see how grief affects things that people normally don't think about. So when Bud sees this folded up pile of clothes in the chair, it instantly reminds him of his mom and how she used to fold up his clothes, we're going to presume for school. And he says that, he hallucinates that there's this note on them because his mom used to leave him a note with his clothes in the morning just to be like, hi, I love you, Bud, have a good day. Obviously, because she probably had to go to work really early in the morning to be able to support both of them, right? But as he rubs his eyes more and he blinks his eyes, he realizes that the note was never actually there. And he realizes to what degree he really misses his mom. Bud gets halfway down the stairs and he realizes that he hears Calloway and Miss Thomas going at it real good again. Miss Thomas is basically saying, you don't understand where this kid is from. You don't understand how terrible those homes are to grow up in. Even if you don't believe him, you can't turn away this child that we are fully capable of taking care of. And again, remember, they know what kind of economic situation they're in with the Great Depression. They know that there's no one coming back for this kid. No one has the money to just come back for this random kid if he's not being actively put in their home for a specific reason. No one is saving a kid off the side of the road. You know what I mean? And so she's basically pleading with HEC and being like, it's either he stays here, whether you like him or not, and he can at least, live, or we turn him back to Flint for him to die. And HEC, again, as you know, is just having none of it. He doesn't care. Bud decides that, now I'm going to go downstairs and let them know that I'm awake because this is a little bit awkward. And, that conversation stops. HEC kind of like storms out of the room. He can't really stand the sight of Bud. He's being a toddler. And Miss Thomas comes over to Bud and is like, Bud, we had a really long conversation about you last night. And he starts getting a little nervous, even thinking that he might have to go repack his suitcase because he might be on the road again. But she ends up asking him, would you like to stay here with us at Grand Calloway Station for the foreseeable future? To which Bud only replies with the biggest smile that's ever been plastered across his face in his entire life. Obviously, he says yes. There were a couple of people around him and Miss Thomas and Hermione Calloway when they were all, having this conversation. Obviously, Calloway is out of the room now, but I think it's very interesting that all of these band members are chiming in, and they don't tell Bud that he's a part of the band. They do not say he's a part of the band. They say he's a part of the family. Now, he's a part of the family. All of these people, for their own individual reasons, don't fully believe that Bud has any relation to Herman E. Calloway, but they're just nice enough people, and Bud is a respectful enough child that they're like, you know what, let's take a chance on him. He's going to become part of our family. And you only have to assume that a lot of them got into the band that way as well. They had nowhere else to go. All they had was like talent or like a good demeanor or one thing to be able to offer to Herman E. Calloway. And then suddenly they're sleeping in Grand Calloway Station because they just took a chance on trying to advocate for themselves when they had nothing, right? And so I feel like they're kind of continuing that cycle with Bud, and they're saying, hey, like, you obviously have some kind of unbreakable spirit inside you. Okay, we're gonna take you in because we see that, and you don't need to be on the side of the road, and we're going to extend that kindness that was most likely extended to us at one point to you because we see you. You know, you're a part. They have like fully adopted him at this point, just not legally because, you know, legal adoption, it's just during the Great Depression, it's just really not something that is happening as much, right? Steady Eddie says, hey, since you know you're part of the family, which in turn means, girl, let me take a sip of my drink. Had a couple bowls of something and it's not food, okay? Anyways, um, Steady Eddie gives him a new suitcase to hold his things, and he also gives him a recorder and says, you know, since you're going to be part of the family, part of the band, you should know how to play an instrument, right? And I do think that they wanted him to learn an instrument and see if he had talent. But I also think that they just didn't have anything else around the house for a child to do. You know, what instrument is a child going to play other than a recorder? You know, no one cares if he messes up the recorder. No one cares if he breaks the recorder, right? They're all adults, like not even a teenager. Steady Eddie is the old horn guy, okay? There's a bunch of old people taking care of him. The only stuff that is probably child friendly is in that room that HEC don't want him in. Right. So there are two things that this recorder is accomplishing. Steady Eddie also says, hey, since you're a part of the band, we need to give you a name, and the rest of the band members chime in as well, to which Miss Thomas says, I think I'm going to leave. Steady Eddie says, oh, you don't have to leave, Miss Thomas, and she says, you know, when y'all get to nicknaming each other, it's really just kind of a man thing, and I don't want to be here. I don't care. And so she leaves, and I was like, honestly, girl, you're so real for that. So they're coming up with a name for Bud, and these names, they're meant to poke a little bit of fun. You know what I mean? They're meant to poke a little bit of fun. So they end up on the name Sleepy LeBone. Sleepy because he slept through Miss Thomas changing his clothes and putting him into bed last night and everything else. And he actually came to join the rest of the band downstairs at like 12 is when he woke up. So he's a sleepy little guy. And then LeBone because, you know, he's scrawny. You can see his bones. It's something that everyone immediately clocks as soon as they see him, so shit, why not put it in his name? Bud's new name for the band is Sleepy LeBone, and he plays the recorder. A couple days later, we see that Bud has, you know, settled a little bit into the Grand Calloway Station, and HEC has given him basically just some busy work. He told him to mop a certain part of the house, and Bud says that Calloway doesn't even realize that he's not putting Bud to work at all. Bud is having fun pretending that the mop bucket is a ship and the mop is like the captain and he's sinking and there's a storm, and he's basically just being a kid playing around in the mop bucket, right? And he's like, you know, he don't even know I got life so bad before that if you tell me to mop a floor, I'ma have fun doing it, right? And so while he's doing his chores, he hears the band, you know, things start to like melt together. He hears one instrument play for, you know, 20, 30 seconds. Then the other instrument comes in. Then the other instrument comes in. And he says that as you're hearing these instruments pile up, it would be really hard to pick which one is your favorite until Miss Thomas starts her singing slash humming, okay? And he says it's basically like magic. And this is the part of the book that really just, I love this part, okay? Because we really see the black influence, the black musical influence. Like, I was just waiting for this point for them to get to the jazz. So, as he's describing the band and how they sound, again, I said that, they're obviously doing some kind of jazz. And the reason that he can't call Miss Thomas a singer is because she's actually scatting. She's doing the little doo bop and those things. I'm not gonna like start singing. We're not gonna like do that. But you know what I mean. You know the song with Cher and Future, Different Strokes, and she says it's Scooby Dooby. That's what. That's, the Scooby Dooby Dooby part is supposed to be scatting, so that's kind of like along the lines of what Miss Thomas is doing, but like well. Um, that's just, oh my goodness, that song is the funniest, one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my entire life. Why are Cher and Future even having conversations? Why do they know each other? Why do they know each other? Who listened to that and was like, yeah, yeah, that's music. Scooby Dooby Dooby? Anyways, when they're done with their rehearsal, Bud obviously he's forgotten about mopping long ago. He's right in front of the band. He stands up and gives them a standing ovation, and he says to himself, now I understand why on all my mom's flyers there were six exclamation points after the name of the band because hello. The next day, the band is going up to play a couple gigs in a couple different places, and they're sitting in the car just kind of talking. And Bud asks, who's this white dude, right? He's one of the members of the band, but he also serves a different purpose. So, in the place that they're in, Negroes aren't allowed to own anything. So what Herman E. Calloway ends up having to do is put the name of the band and like all their assets in the possession of this white dude legally so that he can, actually kind of have his own stuff, like his own life. And he says that the white guy is who they send in to make all these deals. Okay, Steady Eddie and a couple other people are kind of explaining this stuff to him, just talking while they're going to get everything set up. The white guy goes and talks to the other white people and is like, yo, I have a band for your event. Let's get it started. Let's get it cooking. Let's get it popping. And the white people are like, okay, like you're white. We'll listen to your band. And then he tricks them and he brings in the Dusky Devastators of the Depression, which is like literally everyone is black except for this white dude, right? And Steady Eddie says, but guess what? We've never been stiffed. They've always paid because these white people love the nigga music. They love the nigga jive. They just don't like talking to us. So if Herman E. Calloway was to go in there by himself, we would all be out of money. We would be out of jobs. And Calloway Station wouldn't exist. So I just thought that one, I like that they explained this to Bud because even though they're pretty sure this kid is like a little bit not all the way there, they're still treating him like family. You know what I mean? Like when they say family, they say family. They're like, you're gonna know what's going on because this is your business too. This is your reality too. Like you should know the reality of the situation that we are all in as a family and as a group. But then I also think just from the author, I like that he places these kind of reality checks along through the story because while it is a coming of age story for Bud, we can also see that it's rife with racism. It's rife with, financial hardship, economical, economic hardship, governmental issues, power and control issues. And I like that in the middle of telling a story, sometimes the author reels it back in and is like, hey, but like for real, this is how real life was. When they're done with all their gigs for the day, Miss Thomas tells Bud, hey, like I told you, I'm not always going to be here with the band. You're with the band. I'm Miss Thomas, baby. So she tells him, you don't have to go too fast with packing up the stuff into the van this time because you're going home with Herman E. Calloway in his car. HEC and Bud look at each other and they're very not happy about that. They're both kind of grumbly about that, obviously one more than the other. I'm sure you can guess who. But like it or not, they've got a bond for the next, couple hours on the way back to Callaway Station. So Bud is packing up the car and Hermione Callaway, there's a little rock by his foot, right? And he says, Bud, grab that rock. Bud grabs it. Obviously, that's basically his boss, dad, father, something. And he's confused because he's like, it's just a rock. But then he sees HEC writing something on it. He writes M5236, or is it M5236? Girl, okay. My script is kind of like all over the place. It's like little jots of notes. Basically, he writes numbers on the rock and he puts it into the glove box of his car. And Bud is intrigued by this and he opens the glove box and he sees that these rocks have, writings along the same lines of the rocks that his mom gave him. So he tells Hermione Calloway, I have rocks like this. Hermione Calloway turns to him and is like, hmm, goes back to driving. But says again, he's like, no, really, like I have rocks like this. They have writing on them. Like it's actually kind of like exactly like this. And he's just doesn't give a fuck. And Bud says, you know what? If you don't believe me, I'm gonna show you when I get back to my suitcase. To which HEC finally looks at him, but still doesn't say anything because he doesn't believe him slash doesn't really give a fuck. They get back to Callaway Station, and Bud, good on his word, shows Mr. Calloway the rocks, and instead of like being intrigued, instead he gets extremely mad and he starts yelling at Bud and saying, I thought I told you not to touch my shit. Where did you get these fucking rocks? Where are they from, you stupid fucking bitch? I have these fucking bells everywhere. How the fuck did you get past my bells? Why the fuck were you in my drawer? Why are you taking my shit? Why are you fucking mocking me, you trick ass little nigga? Like he's just going off to the point where Jimmy comes upstairs and he's like, what's going on? What's going on? Why are you yelling at this kid? And then Jimmy, he sees the rocks, he kind of sees what's going on, and he gets down on Bud's level and he asks him, hey, like, no tea, no shade, like, where did you get those rocks for real? Bud says very innocently, well, I got them from my mom. Jimmy goes further and asks, okay, where did your mom get these rocks? And Bud says, I don't know. you know, Calloway is still in the back, and after hearing that, I don't know, he just starts it all again. He's like, you fucking bitch. Jimmy is kind of, still trying to de escalate the situation, and he's like, Bud, like, what did you say your mom's name was again? And Bud says, well, no one ever asked me. Her name is Angela. And then everything goes silent. Silent. Guess who Angela is, guys? Guess for me. Three, two, one. I love how that was not 3, 2, 1 at all. It's Hermione Calloway's daughter. Upon finally hearing his daughter's name after who knows how long, Hermione Calloway's pipe comes out of his mouth and he looks like he's just seen a ghost. And this is the most emotionally immature man I have ever had the displeasure of reading about. He basically storms out of the room because he can't deal with his emotions in that moment, realizing that Bud is actually not full of shit. And while he may not be his son, well, he sure is his grandson. HEC spends the rest of the night crying in the little girl's room that Bud is supposed to be sleeping in. So Bud basically doesn't have a bedroom tonight because his grandfather is an emotionally stunted piece of shit. And so he's downstairs talking with Jimmy and, kind of the other people of the band and Miss Thomas, and they're finally talking about his mom and who she is. Miss Thomas starts asking Bud more questions about his mom, like how her name was spelled, and then they're really starting to realize, okay, like this is Hermione Calloway's daughter, and this is her son. And then Bud asks the question of, well, why did he never come look for us? We're finding out that we're related. If he would have just called my mom, we would have come back. And I love Miss Thomas. I love the way that she breaks this down for Bud. She grabs his hands and is like, Bud, no one knew that you existed. Your mom ran away from home when she was very young, and now you're here. Miss Thomas basically gives Bud a rundown of his mom's story and says, her father, Hermione Calloway, as you can see, he's kind of a dick. right? So he wanted everything for Bud's mom because she was a very smart lady. He was convinced she was going to go to college, become like a doctor or something along those lines, and he kept pushing her, pushing her, pushing her towards a dream that she didn't even necessarily want, right? And so she pushes back against her father and says, you know, I hate your strict bullshit. I don't want to be what you want me to be. I'm going to go run away with one of your drummers and you're never going to hear from me again. And that's exactly what she did. And so we can only assume that the drummer ended up leaving them as soon as he found out she was pregnant because Bud has absolutely no idea who his father was. We haven't even gotten like a single description of him. There's no pictures of him anywhere. So we can only assume, like I said, as soon as he found out that Angela was pregnant, he dipped out. And so then it's also heavily implied, right, that she ended up killing herself. It's not that she died of some random natural causes. You know, let's think about this for a minute, okay? She was 26 when she died, and she had been able to raise Bud for 6 years, which means that when she was pregnant, she was 20 years old, which means she probably ran away from home around the late 18, early 19 range, right? So she runs away as a teenager, gets hitched with this random drummer who ends up leaving her in Flint, Michigan, in the middle of the Great Depression. Single mom with a child, okay? She already had some kind of mental issues going on. Okay, again, we don't really get an exact name for that, but she was going through some mental health issues on top of that. And so she ends up taking her own life, and that's where we kind of get Bud's story coming off of that. Now, does Miss Thomas tell Bud that it's most likely that his mom killed herself? No, but as an adult reading the book and, you know, just putting the pieces together, it's very obvious that's what happened. Miss Thomas ends up giving Bud a picture of his mom actually when she's 16, unlike the picture that he has in his suitcase, if you guys remember, where she's just a little kid. Now he has a picture that somewhat looks like the mama that he remembers, right? And we kind of see everything coming together and we finally see people believing him, which I'm just like, guys, like, no child makes shit like this up. And I know they were kind of under the impression that his mom was the one making shit up, but I'm just like, again, like, no child is going to travel across cities to meet some random nigga if there is not some like truth to what he's saying. And I will say that's the one part of the book that really frustrated me, is knowing how it ends. I think that's why rereading this book, it's so like addicting. It's like, I know how it ends. I just need you guys to get there because you're asking him all the wrong questions. You're talking about all the wrong things. If you just would have asked his mother's name, we could have avoided like the last third of this book. Anyways, Bud is going upstairs to show them the picture that he has of his mother, and he forgets, you know, that Hermione Calloway is kind of up there crying his eyes out. So, he actually goes to comfort him. He's like, you know, I'm gonna be in this room. I'm gonna sneak in, sneak out. Why don't I just go like put my hand on this guy's back? Well, they're there, HEC. So he goes over to put his hand on his back, and HEC like jumps away from him, jerks away from him. We can kind of tell this man has not had a lot of love in his life after his daughter left, okay? So, yes, he's rough around the edges. You can say that's one of the reasons. I personally don't think that gives you permission to be so rude to a child, but we can see this man has not been loved in any kind of way for a long time. So he jumps away from Bud's hand, but immediately upon seeing that it's Bud, he starts crying and he actually tries to say that he's sorry. He's like, I'm so like, oh my gosh, like, Unfortunately, between those breathy sobs and like the tears, he doesn't say Bud, he says Buddy. So while Bud is rubbing his back, he says, like, thanks for the sorry, bro, but it's actually Bud, not Buddy. To which HEC starts crying his eyes out again because now this one I feel like is actually, you know, I can understand why it hit him so hard because that's what his daughter named her kid. And he's getting the name wrong. You know what I mean? It's like he's the only piece of his daughter that he has left, and he can't even call him by the right fucking name. I'm sure he's beating himself up in 1,000 different ways right now. I think he should, but Upon hearing, oh, that's actually Bud, not Buddy, he starts crying again. He becomes inconsolable. Bud is like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go back downstairs. And he leaves him up there to cry, basically. Everything kind of wraps up for the night. All of the adults are in various places, just kind of crying over the fact that they're happy that they know what happened to Angela, but they've been waiting for her for 11 years and they just all found out that she's dead. So it's just kind of a very somber night for the adults. However, Bud retreats back to his room. I think HEC has moved at this point. He's crying in his own room now, and he looks at the new picture that he has of his mom, and he says, "Here we go again, Mama, but this time I can't wait." And he starts playing his horn, and I'm gonna actually read to you a little excerpt because this almost made me cry. So he starts playing his horn, and it says, "If you didn't have a real good imagination, you'd probably think those noises were the sounds of some kid blowing a horn for the first time. But I knew better than that. I could tell those were the squeaks and squawks of one door closing and another one opening." And again, we could really see how he holds his mom so dearly in his heart no matter what. And he's right. He's right. As soon as he puts that lips to his horn, he is opening an entirely new doorway that he could have never even dreamed for himself. And just like the book starts, is how it ends. Here we go again. It's coming full circle. Like, quite literally, this entire book is a full circle of emotions and lessons and growing up and love. And I just, what a great way to end the book in a way that shows that Bud has matured so much, but he's still kept that softness about him. So it's another kind of short video. I think honestly I haven't edited this together yet. I always think the video is short and then I go and I put the clips together and I'm like, oh, it's actually an hour long. So who knows? But that's the end of our book. I just love this book. I think I really have nothing else to say. I could go on for hours about how much I love this book, but I really just love the last chunk of it because it's so emotional. You feel your heart racing. You know that the end is near. You know that Bud is about to get his happy ending, but they just can't get to it until they get to it, and then it all explodes. And I really think that's kind of how life actually happens. Like, you can see that something's coming, you can feel that something's coming, and then it just all explodes. I love Bud Not Buddy. I love this book. I love the beginning. I love the middle. I love the ending. I love all the characters. I love how it comes together. And I love that it's a happy ending, okay? Because this absolutely could have ended on, "That's not my son. I don't fucking know you, and your mom's a fucking hoe." It definitely could have ended on that note. That would be a more realistic note to end on. But I've always loved how he ends up finding his family, he ends up finding the band, and everyone ends up finding Angela as well. It's as much about him getting back to his family as it is about his mom getting back to her family as well. So let me stop gushing, okay? Let's get to the outro. Thank you guys so much for completing another book with me. Okay, so what is in store on the channel? What's our next video gonna be? We are going to be reading another Newbery, John Newbery Medal Award winner. Okay, this is Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott Odell. This is also a book that I was obsessed with as a child. It taught me to appreciate Native Americans, which I think is very important. We really need to learn to appreciate our natives. We need to appreciate Black and brown people. And I feel like you can see those themes in the books that I have been choosing. Okay, that's for a reason. It taught me to appreciate self-reliance. It taught me to appreciate the indomitable human spirit. Okay, I love this book. I love this book. Not as much as Bud Not Buddy. Okay. Definitely not as much. But I did have a little obsession with this as well, so I'm really excited to get into it with you guys. And this one is even shorter yet than Bud Not Buddy. So the next book I pick is gonna be long, girl. It's gonna be long, okay? I'm gonna feed y'all good. So make sure to join me in 2 more weeks so that we can start Island of the Blue Dolphins. And again, thank you so much. In the meantime, stay literate, y'all.